My name is Estella. I'm 25 years old, and the night everything changed started like an ordinary birthday dinner. At least that's what I believed when I walked into the restaurant with my parents. For most of my life, birthdays had never meant much in our house. When I was a child, they were quiet events. Sometimes there was a small cake, sometimes a quick happy birthday, and then the day simply returned to normal. No big parties, no decorations, no excitement. Just another day. So when my parents insisted on taking me out to celebrate my 25th birthday, it felt unusual. They had booked a table at an elegant restaurant in the center of the city. The kind of place with polished wooden tables, dim candlelight, and soft jazz playing in the background. The air smelled like grilled steak and butter. Everything about the place felt expensive and carefully designed. It was far more special than anything they had ever done for me before. As I stepped inside, I remember thinking maybe something had changed between us. Maybe they were finally starting to see me as an adult. Maybe this dinner was their way of saying they were proud of me. I had a stable job, my own apartment, plans for my future. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. My mother greeted the hostess with a bright smile that looked slightly forced. My father kept glancing around the restaurant like he was waiting for something to happen. At first, I assumed they had planned some kind of surprise. Maybe friends would walk in. Maybe they had an announcement of their own. But I had no idea that the announcement was actually about me. We sat down and ordered drinks. The conversation felt strangely controlled, almost rehearsed. My father kept adjusting his napkin. My mother slowly sipped her wine while watching me carefully, as if studying every reaction on my face. The waiter eventually brought out a small dessert with a candle on top. A few nearby tables politely clapped while I leaned forward and blew out the flame. For a brief moment, I truly felt happy. Turning 25 felt like the beginning of a new chapter in my life. But the moment the smoke from the candle disappeared into the air, the atmosphere at the table changed. The silence became uncomfortable. My father folded his hands together and leaned slightly forward in his chair. It was the same posture he used whenever he had serious news to share. Then he cleared his throat. "Estella," he said slowly, looking directly at me. "There's something we need to tell you." At first I thought it was a joke or some dramatic birthday surprise. Then he said the words that instantly shattered the entire evening. "We adopted you." For a second I actually laughed. It was the kind of nervous laugh that escapes before your brain processes what it just heard. I waited for them to laugh too. They didn't. Their faces remained serious, cold, even. My smile slowly faded as the reality began to sink in. "Wait, what?" I asked quietly. My mother leaned back in her chair and gave a short laugh. But it wasn't warm. It sounded almost amused. "We only kept you for the tax benefits," she said casually. The words hung in the air like a blade. "Now you're 25. You're not useful anymore." The restaurant suddenly felt colder. The sounds around us faded into a distant blur. I stared at her, trying to understand how someone could say something like that so casually. For 25 years I believed these two people were my parents. The people who raised me. The people who were supposed to care about me. And now my entire childhood was being reduced to a financial decision. My father nodded calmly, as if confirming a business agreement. "We've already started the legal process to remove you from our records," he added. My mind started racing through memories from my childhood. Quiet birthdays. Cold hugs. Achievements that were met with indifference instead of pride. For years I had convinced myself I was imagining the distance between us. But sitting there in that moment, everything finally made sense. For a brief second tears threatened to form in my eyes. But instead something unexpected happened inside me. The shock slowly faded. And it was replaced by calm. Because the truth was this conversation didn't shock me as much as they expected. Several months earlier I had started questioning small details about my past. Something about my birth records had never completely matched the stories my parents told me. Curiosity turned into quiet research. Late nights studying documents. Phone calls to hospitals. And eventually a DNA test. A test that changed everything. So instead of arguing or begging, I simply folded my hands on the table and looked calmly at both of them. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just said something that neither of them expected. "That's funny," I said quietly, "because I found my biological family." Both of their faces froze. "They're actually here," I added. "In this restaurant." The air at the table changed instantly. Only seconds earlier my parents had looked relaxed, almost satisfied, like the conversation was already finished. Now they were completely still. My father's hand stopped halfway to his glass. My mother blinked several times like she hadn't heard me correctly. She was the first to recover. She leaned back and let out a small dismissive laugh. "Estella," she said slowly, swirling the wine in her glass. "You shouldn't invent stories like that. It's embarrassing." My father nodded. "We've already told you the truth tonight," he said. "There's no need for dramatics." I watched their faces carefully. For 25 years I had searched for even the smallest sign of love in their expressions. But now I saw something else entirely. Confidence. They believed they were still in control of the situation. They thought I was bluffing to protect my pride. But they were wrong. I leaned forward slightly and glanced toward the restaurant entrance. "I'm not bluffing," I said calmly. My mother rolled her eyes. "Estella, stop this nonsense." Before she could finish, the restaurant door opened. A small group walked inside. I had been watching the time all evening, waiting for exactly that moment. The hostess greeted them politely and then pointed in our direction. Without realizing it, both of my parents turned to look. At first their expressions showed confusion, but as the group slowly approached our table, that confusion began turning into something else. Shock. The woman walking in front had deep auburn hair, the exact same shade as mine. Her green eyes looked almost identical to the ones I saw in the mirror every morning. Behind her stood a tall man with sharp cheekbones and a calm expression that looked strangely familiar. And next to him was a young man who looked so much like me that anyone could guess we were related. The woman stopped a few steps away from the table. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at me. "Estella?" she asked softly. I slowly stood from my chair. For a moment the entire restaurant seemed to disappear. The music, the conversations, the clinking glasses. None of it mattered anymore. I could only see the three people standing in front of me. I nodded. "Hi," I said quietly. The woman covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. The man beside her gently placed a hand on her shoulder, though his own eyes were emotional as well. Behind me, the silence from my adoptive parents became unbearable. I turned back toward them. The confident smiles they had worn earlier were completely gone. My father stared at the strangers with a tense expression. "What is this?" he demanded. "The truth," I replied calmly. The auburn-haired woman stepped forward. "We've been searching for our daughter for 25 years, she said softly. "There was a mistake in the hospital records when she was born. We only recently found the documents that helped us trace her." My adoptive parents sat there speechless. Only minutes earlier they had acted as if they held all the power. Now that control had vanished. I picked up my purse and looked directly at them. "You said you kept me for tax benefits," I said calmly. "Well, congratulations. Your investment period is officially over." Neither of them said a word. For the first time in my life, they had nothing left to say. I turned away from the table where my old life had just ended. My biological mother stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. Unlike the cold hugs I remembered from childhood, this one felt warm and real. My biological father smiled gently. "We reserved a table on the other side of the restaurant," he said. "We were hoping you'd join us." I looked back once more at the table where everything had changed. Then I walked away with the family I had finally found and toward a future I had never expected.